Hello, my name is Emma, and today I'm going to be talking about some character murders that I am still not over. As a reader, character deaths are one of the most devastating moments that you could possibly experience, but I realized while there are quite a few books that feature characters who die, main characters who die, there's only like a small few that have actually really deeply affected me, so I'm going to be talking about some of those today. This video does contain a paid promotion by Disney Book Group in honor of the release of Murder Trending by Gretchen McNeil. Murder Trending takes place in the near future where people, just regular everyday citizens, are able to live stream the deaths of convicted felons. Our main character's name is Dee, and one day she wakes up in a warehouse and realizes that she is the next person to fall victim to the Postman app. So it is all about Dee teaming up with a handful of other felons who are about to be murdered on the Postman app. They've named themselves the Death Row Breakfast Club, and she is trying to prove her innocence so that she does not pay fatally for a crime she did not commit. I'm really interested in this book. I'm sure you can tell by the BuzzFeed Unsolved hat. I love creepy, morbid things, and so I feel like the examination of what could potentially happen in the future where people's deaths are being live streamed is just really fascinating to me. I've heard this book being described as the Hunger Games meets Scream Queens, which I love both of those things, so I think this is going to be a really great fit for me. I'm very excited to read it. Murder Trending hits bookstores today on August 10th. I'm very excited to read it. I hope a lot of you are interested as well. But for today, I'm going to be talking about some previous character murders that have just affected me to this day. Now, this video is obviously going to contain spoilers, so I will give you a quick overview of the specific books that I will be talking about where characters die, and then I will also have timestamps in the description so you can skip around if you don't want to be spoiled. But like, that is your spoiler warning for this video. So I will be talking about some deaths from Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, as well as Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, City of Glass by Cassandra Clare, Clockwork Princess by Cassandra Clare, Lord of Shadows by Cassandra Clare, They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera, and Thunderhead by Neil Shusterman. Feel free to use those timestamps in the description, but that is your spoiler warning. May the odds be ever in your favor, and let's jump into the video. So obviously, the big death in the Half-Blood Prince is of course Albus Dumbledore, and this death is really memorable for me because I think it's probably like the first ever character death that ever really impacted me. Funny story, I've mentioned this on my channel before, but I believe that a lot of you guys have also been spoiled by the same experience. On the night of the release of Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, a few horrible, terrible people decided to drive around screaming, "Snape killed Dumbledore."
Snape kills Dumbledore!
Right outside a bookstore, people waiting to get the book, and I stumbled across that video online, and so I knew about Dumbledore's death going into it. I know a lot of you guys can relate because I've mentioned this before, but even though I knew that Dumbledore was going to die, like, I guess I don't know if I forgot about it the first time I read it, but it still really, really hit me. Dumbledore is just one of those characters that seemed immortal, especially reading it as a young kid. When you read it and you're older, and you do pick up on a lot of foreshadowing as we're coming to Dumbledore's end, but it just felt like he would be there until the end, and especially for him to die at such a crucial moment when he was really needed in this fight against Voldemort. I mean, like, great writing on J.K. Rowling's part, but it was still nonetheless really hard for us. A lot of people out there have mixed feelings on Dumbledore, but he has always been a good person in my eyes. He's done so much for the wizarding world. He's really changed his life to do good, and his death was just so impactful as a young kid who really looked up to this character, and all of the other characters in this book really looked up to him, and then he's just dead. Dumbledore's death is one that I know I will never get over. Like most of these deaths, and most literary deaths in general, like, it was necessary, and it's understandable why the author did that, but Dumbledore's death has and will continue to hit me very hard every single time I reread it. Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. Now, this is a book of war, so there are naturally quite a few deaths in here that are really heartbreaking, but there are two that I'm going to be talking about, and I'm sure most of you can guess what they are. Number one is Dobby. Dobby's death is just so, like, I don't think anyone expected Dobby to die, because he's another character that just seemed so permanent. You know, he's in the background of almost every single Harry Potter book from book 2 forward, and he just does so much to help out Harry and the rest of them that, like, I just never expected him to not be there. Also, the circumstances of his death are just so cruel. Like, he's there saving Harry and his friends yet again, and he's just wants to protect them and get them to safety, and he dies in the process. It is just, it's so noble of him, and that is the death that I think everyone wanted Dobby to have if he had to die. But it is just, it's so hurtful. Also, with his last words being Harry Potter, I get feelings. The other death that really affected me in Deathly Hallows is, of course, Fred Weasley. Now, when I read Deathly Hallows for the first time, I wasn't as affected by Fred's death. I think a lot of the deaths in Harry Potter really, like, went over my head when I was younger, because I was so focused on Harry and the gang surviving that, like, other people, as long as they didn't die, like, it didn't impact me as much. But of course, as I've reread Harry countless times over the years, Fred's death has really started to impact me. I remember reading an article where J.K. Rowling said that she of course had to kill a Weasley because it was just unrealistic for all of them to be fighting this war and for all of them to survive. So like most of these, I get it, but it doesn't make it hurt any less. The scene where all of the family members are just standing over him and sobbing is just so emotional, and especially from Harry's perspective, like, we don't get the mind of any of the Weasleys, which would just be tumultuous. But with seeing Harry, just like watching them from afar, not really being able to connect with the family and what they're going through is just so heartbreaking. There's just so many circumstances of Fred's death that are so sad, like the fact that, you know, he has a twin, like there is someone that is closer to him than anyone else in the world that has to be alone for the first time in their life. I once saw this really amazing yet cruel Tumblr post talking about the scene in Order of the Phoenix where Molly Weasley is seeing all of her loved ones dead in the form of a boggart, and even in death, Molly didn't see Fred and George separated, and it just like that's a tough pill to swallow. The next character death happens in City of Glass. Now, in this one, I am not talking about Valentine Morgenstern, like he needed to die, but Max Lightwood deserved so much better. I think out of every death on this list, this is the one I most understand. In the Mortal Instruments series, we have a very unique experience with Max. He's not present in City of Bones. We meet him for the first time in City of Ashes, and we get a little bit more of his personality in City of Glass, but he's still obviously not a main character because he's so young. I think out of every innocent character in this story at this point, Max was definitely the most disposable. You know, he was young, he couldn't really fight in the war that was happening and that all the stuff that is to come. Even though we don't know Max as well as we know other characters in the series, the thing that hurts the most is that he's just so innocent. I just feel like there was so much potential for his character. Like, I would have loved to see him grow up and be a teenage Shadowhunter, an adult. I would have loved to see how he interacts with the rest of his family as he gets older, and it's just like, we'll never see it. Max's death is another one that I think didn't hit me as much as it has in rereads compared to the first time I read it, but definitely the more I read it and the more I think about his character, I think about the influence of his death on the other characters and just how much grief is caused by the truly unjust murder of this little boy, and it's really, really sad. Just all of these deaths are just really, really sad. Moving on to Clockwork Princess, there are two deaths in this book that I want to talk about. One is a murder on theme with the video, but another one is just a straight up death that I will truly never get over. There's a few in here that aren't technically murders, but I need to talk about them in this video. The murder that I won't get over is, of course, Jessamine Lovelace. Now, I had a really unique experience with Jessamine after reading from her character. I think I'm on reread number 3 or 4 of the Infernal Devices currently. I really disliked Jessamine the first 2 times I read from her. I just thought she was so annoying and self-centered, and she didn't add a lot to the story. But then the third time I really started to warm up to her, understand her character more, and now as I am just finished with Clockwork Prince and about to reread Clockwork Princess, I love her so much, and I think she is such a unique, thought-provoking character that had a lot of value in the story. And she's just gone. You know, for all the stuff that Jessamine did in the previous books, I still don't think she deserved to die. I think she just deserved a light punishment, which she got, and then she still died a very tragic and painful death. The positive thing about Jessamine is that she does survive as a ghost. We see her later in the story. Cassie has released snippets talking about where her character goes after the conclusion of the Infernal Devices series. So it's nice that she's not like totally out of our lives when we are immersed in the Infernal Devices series, but it's just still so sad because I think especially like had she survived the ending of Clockwork Princess, her character would have really transformed and there would have been so much more for her, but we just don't get it. I feel like I'm ending every single one of these like this where I'm just like, well, they're dead, so what are we gonna do now? And the other death that happens in Clockwork Princess is of course William Herondale. Now, I feel that I made peace with Will's death a lot easier than a lot of other readers have. Number one, because I'd never connected to the Infernal Devices the same way that I connected with the Mortal Instruments. But number two, because Will lived a long life, and that's something that none of these characters except for Dumbledore can really relate to. Will lived a long, happy life surrounded by people who loved him, people who he was able to love himself, and that is like a blessing. That is like best case scenario for a fantasy character, man. So finishing this story, I don't feel I was necessarily affected as much as other readers because like I could acknowledge that like he lived like the greatest life that anyone could ever ask for. But I'm still super sad about it because he left behind children. He left behind Tessa, who has to live her immortal life knowing that she does not have Will with her anymore. And that is what's really sad about his death. A lot of times when it comes to literature, we don't really see what happens after the character's death. Sometimes it happens mid-series and then we get to see the grieving period. But especially with someone like Tessa, who is going to live forever, her grief is so different than anyone else's. And her attachment to Will in that respect is just really, really sad. I am about to read Clockwork Princess in like the next couple of weeks or so, so I'm very intrigued to see how my thoughts on these deaths fare after having them like really, really fresh in my mind. But it's an amazing conclusion and it has not amazing deaths, but like emotional. They're very emotional deaths. Moving on to Lord of Shadows. There are quite a few deaths in Lord of Shadows. I feel like for a sequel, there was like quite a few people to die. But the one death that just shook the entire fandom is, of course, Livy Blackthorn. I just did not expect Livy to die. Like, if you watch my Lord of Shadows theories video, like, I was really confident that in Lord of Shadows, Livy was going to agree to be Ty's parabatai, and they were going to live happily ever after, and it was taken away so quickly from all of us. After reading the end of Lord of Shadows, I don't even think I cried right away. Like, I think I just sort of like snapped into a trance. I know I took a shower immediately after and I was so messed up mentally from Livy's death that I literally fell in the shower. I did not slip on anything. I lost my balance because I was just woozy from reading Livy's death. I'm not kidding. Livy's death was especially unexpected for me, being such a big fan of Cassandra Clare, because she never really kills off like very important characters unless they are like the villain and they need to die. So it was a very like momentous occasion in the Shadowhunter books for Livy to die, I think, and knowing that Queen of Air and Darkness is going to pick up right at the end of Lord of Shadows and we are going to see so much of the grief that the Blackthorns experience after her death is just soul crushing to think about. Livy just had such a wonderful life ahead of her and we'll just never get to see it. Even her last words were cut off. She starts off by saying Ty, I, and we never hear what she was going to finish with, and I'm pretty sure Cassie's going to keep it that way. And Livy's death is just, it's so sad, y'all. It's so sad. I think it's one of the saddest out of here in my opinion, just because she was so young and it was just so unexpected and out of the blue. I don't think anyone saw her specific death in that scene coming. Next we have They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera. Now, as the title presumes, there are quite a lot of deaths in this book, and the one that affected me the most is not a murder, but it is the death of Mateo Torres. Mateo is my baby. I love Mateo with all of my heart. He's just so precious. I just want to be friends with him. Like, I would have loved to just spend his last day with him and make him happy. And he dies. The thing that is especially sad about Mateo's death is that it was so accidental. Like, I really thought we were getting to a point in the book, because this is really close to the end, where I'm like, oh my god, like, they're really gonna survive. Like, Adam's not gonna hurt us. Spoiler alert, he did. And he comes out of his room just so happy that he doesn't remember that the stove is broken, and he told his neighbor not to fix it because he thought he was going to die before he got home again, and it just blows up and he burns to death, and it's so messed up. Matteo's death really affected me. This is another one that I had to reread it like quite a few times to make sure he was actually dead, just because I could not believe it. Even though this is a book where the premise is that these people are going to die by the end of it, I just wasn't expecting him to die in that moment, because it comes from such a happy, light-hearted place, and then it's just sobbing all over the place, all over the pages, just sobbing. And my final book on the list of character deaths I'm still not over is Thunderhead. Now, the Arc of a Scythe series is similar to They Will Die at the End, where the whole concept of the story revolves around death and mortality and dying and murder or gleaning. But the end of Thunderhead is really powerful, and the death in this book that has affected me the most is the self-gleaning or suicide of Scythe Curie. She's just another Dumbledore character that felt so permanent to me. Like, I was not expecting her to die, whether she's gleaned or self-gleaned in this story. The scene where Scythe Curie self-gleans is a really beautifully dark moment where the entire town is sinking and there are sharks in the water, so rather than all of the citizens die and be eaten by sharks, all of the Scythes like honorably glean them, and then they self-glean themselves. And it's just the way that Neil Shusterman writes the scene and the atmosphere of it. It's just really emotionally overwhelming. I remember I was listening to the scene at the gym and I just started crying while on the treadmill because I was just so taken aback by this moment. With Thunderhead being the second book in the series and we having one left, I really want it to not be true. I mean, in this series we have had people say they have self-gleaned and then they're alive, so I don't know. My hopes for it are pretty low. I really think she is like permanently dead, but you never know, maybe Neil Shusterman will surprise us. Probably not. Alrighty, well that concludes my video on character deaths I am still not over. There are definitely so many more literary deaths out there that are super significant and important, but these ones particularly just really struck me, and they're ones that I'm going to be remembering for a very long time. If you happen to like fiction about murder, definitely check out Murder Trending, which is in stores now. I am very excited to read this one myself, and I think it'll be like a very interesting, introspective read. I would love to say please let me know what character deaths you are still not over, but that opens up a whole can of worms for more books for us to be spoiled by that weren't included in this video, so please proceed with caution in the comment section. But if you have read these books, let me know your thoughts on these character deaths as well. But that is it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you soon for a new one. Bye!